Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
All across the fantasy universe, welcome in one and all. It is the Fantasy Football Hustle, powered by Pro Football Focus. How are you, everybody? Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Drake, fightingchancefantasy.com. That's where you find me. Joined, as always, by the analytical assassin, Dwayne McFarland. You read his good work over at profootballfocus.com, at pff.com, and, of course, establishtherun.com. Dwayne, you and I did a little draft last night, and it was fun because we got to draft in a best ball format, FFPC. If you guys want to go to our YouTube channel, it's YouTube exclusive. We do the entire draft. We had a chance to get Cam Akers and passed on him in the first round. We're thinking maybe we'll get him back in the second round and it'd be a nice compliment to Derrick Henry, our first round pick. Well, you know, kind of sucks for people that drafted Cam Akers because news broke today that Cam Akers is going to be out for the season with a injured Achilles. He'll miss the entire 21 season. Obviously, a massive blow to Akers, Dwayne, and owners who drafted him. We wish the 22-year-old the very best on what will surely be a long recovery. But we got to move this forward, and we got to talk about Darrell Henderson. He's the next man up. I know you got some great utilization tweets. If you're following Dwayne at Dwayne McFarland, you can read all that stuff. But behind Henderson, you know, it's a bunch of scrubs. It's like a 7th-round pick and some UDFAs. They have 0 NFL carries. So we'll see if they add anybody. Schefter saying, oh, we're not going to add anybody at the moment. That's nonsense. They're just broke, and there's nobody good to add. We'll see who gets cut, and maybe they'll make a trade. But welcome in. First off, what'd you think of the news, and kind of just expand upon now this Darrell Henderson projection?
Yeah, I think the news sucks.
Yeah,
because we were all looking forward to seeing, you know, Cam Akers get a shot at really being, you know, a bell cow or something close to it based on what we saw down the stretch. It was also a topic that people really love talking about on Twitter. So I'm going to miss having that, like, to generate, you know, conversation.
For sure.
Because it was definitely one of the, you know, every year there's 3 or 4 players that kind of divide the masses, and Cam Akers seemed to be turning into one of those players. So I always enjoy, you know, digging deep in on those kind of guys, and he was one of those this year. But with all that said, my Scott Fish Bowl team is, you know, I won't say it's done, but I mean, Cam Akers was, and if you guys saw my draft, I went really light on running back. So Cam Akers matters a lot, and he's gone. So, but you know, who cares? Who cares about, you know, my Scott Fish Bowl team besides me? I'll try to fix it. But as far as Darrell Henderson goes, Drake, you're right. Like, I put a tweet out, you know, as far as utilization goes, people can see it, you know, at Dwayne McFarland on Twitter. You can get more information. I was about to pull it up, but then I started getting choppy for some reason. Sometimes when I pull up Twitter, like, my internet gets a little choppy, so I didn't want to pull up the whole thing. But the basics of it are, in the 2 years, you know, they've had Darrell Henderson. There's a lot of things they haven't trusted him with. And so specifically last year, I just looked at all the games where Cam Akers had 5% or less of the snaps. So essentially it was just Henderson and Malcolm Brown getting most of the work. And essentially he was the closer. He handled the 4-minute offense. He handled the early down duties, but pretty much was off the field in long down and distance, pretty much off the field in the 2-minute offense, just wasn't getting any of those looks. And so that's in your second season. Now, Malcolm Brown is gone. So those opportunities are obviously they're up for grabs, right? So, I mean, there's an opportunity there for Darrell Henderson to take that over. My bet is like what you just said. They're going to bring somebody in.
Sure.
You know, if you're drafting in a super deep league, I mean, fine, take a flyer on Xavier Jones, Jake Funk. You can take some flyers on those guys. I think there's going to be someone brought in, or they're going to make a trade. It's going to be tough because they don't have a ton of money. I was just looking at SpotRack before the show, and it looked like they were projecting once they get to their 51, they have like $8 million in cap room. I didn't even get a chance to look at like what like Melvin Gordon's cap hit would be in a trade, but they could rework that somewhat with Gordon. But it could mean like giving him an extra year, which I don't know if they would want to do that. They've already been through giving, an older running back, more money. They've been through that with Todd Gurley. They saw what happened with Le'Veon Bell. So it'll be interesting, to see what they do. But right now, I give Henderson roughly over half of the attempts. So I've got him right at 250. And again, that's on a 17-game season. I've got him at 7.5 rushing touchdowns on 1,080 yards rushing. Got him at 47 receptions for 400 yards receiving. He's pretty good out of the backfield. If he could take over the 2-minute offense, Drake, man, that would be awesome. Because remember, there's not quite as much blocking in the 2-minute offense, and that was really the hope early on. Remember when he was a rookie and Gurley was still there? We were talking maybe he takes over this role as the guy that gets on the field in the 2-minute offense. Gets on the field because of mismatches out of the backfield. He had done some things like that, in his time at Memphis. So maybe he could still get that. I think the long down and distance, he's probably not the guy they want out there. I think he struggles, in that situation. But he could give that up just if he had half of the carries and all the 2-minute offense and at least half the work inside the 5 in this offense. He could still be a very valuable back. I just saw like an FFPC draft board that was posted from earlier today, and he went at the end of the 3rd round, I think round 3, pick 9. That feels just about right to me for Darrell Henderson. I think, he still carries some upside. He still could take over all the work. My bet is, though, they bring in a veteran to give him competition. But I'd much rather own him than Javonte Williams. I would rather own him most likely than Myles Gaskin, who we'll talk about, in a minute. Because I do think there's still just a little bit more upside, for him. But it's not somebody, I saw some tweets, oh, Darrell Henderson, early 2nd round pick now. I don't think that. I'm still concerned that they're just not going to trust him with certain things.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team, though, that likes to run the football. They were top 10 last year in rushing touchdowns. They had 19 of them. And, I see everybody out there, they're like, oh, well, maybe they won't add anybody. They're going to have Darrell Henderson be the guy. If they wanted Darrell Henderson to be the guy, they never would have drafted Cam Akers. That's the whole point, is they wanted someone else to be the guy. And Cam Akers was a really good player. So, we can speculate all day who might be there, who might not. But just a situation to monitor. If you guys have any shares of him, I'm sorry. Maybe if you're in Dynasty, you can buy low on Cam Akers for next year. And if you're getting ready for this year.
I have one Dynasty league where I own Darrell Henderson. So
look at you.
Sometimes these things work out. Why didn't you tell me to draft Darrell Henderson last night, Drake? You're the one that's clairvoyant around these things happening.
Yeah, I know. Really, I should have been on that. I was too busy just making secret underhanded offers on the phone, getting ready for my own leagues. And I know our listeners are getting ready for their leagues out there. And if they're getting ready, that means they're going over to pff.com and they're using our promo code HUSTLE. It's going to save you 25% off any PFF subscription and give you access to all PFF's fantasy football rankings, their locked articles, and the data you can't get anywhere else. That's promo code HUSTLE for 25% off. Hey, guys, that college football preview is available. You're going to want to check that out. It's like 600 pages of breakdowns of a bunch of kids who are probably making more money than I am right now. And also their fantasy football draft guide is available. So there's no better place to be. Go over to pff.com, use our promo code HUSTLE, and get after it. If you're going to preview some teams like we are tonight, that's a good place to start. Tonight, we're continuing our projection series, going through Dwayne's notebook. Tonight is the Miami Dolphins, the Minnesota Vikings, the New England Patriots, New Orleans Saints, and New York Giants. So if you're fans of those teams or players on those teams, you can kind of tell how we were doing this. We're going in alphabetical order. So if you missed anybody in the past, we do 5 teams a week. Just go either to iTunes or YouTube, check out some old shows, and we can rock and roll from there. So let's kick things off, Dwayne. If we got to do things, we're going to do it right around here on the Hustle. If nothing, we're consistent. Let's go to Miami. We're bringing our talents to South Beach. And many assume the 2020 Dolphins were just this middling bunch of clowns. But if you look deeper, you'll see some fantasy goodness. Now, they led the NFL in goal line plays, and they were second in red zone plays. Unfortunately, they only turned those plays inside the 5 into 15 rushing touchdowns, which was 19th in the NFL. So there's room for improvement here. Miami was 15th in rushing attempts and 21st in rushing yards, okay? This was a ground game, as you guys all remember, led by second-year back Myles Gaskin, who kind of appeared out of nowhere. Started 7 games, rushed for nearly 600 yards while catching a very respectable, in that time, 41 balls. Gaskin right now is ADP in the FFPC Football Guys Players Championship, is going off the board at running back 25 in round 6. So let's start there. I want your level of confidence on Myles Gaskin, because I think we had a chance to draft him last night. You're like, nah, I don't want Myles Gaskin. Move along. So what are you thinking with the running game? Let's start there.
And it's not necessarily that I just don't like him. It's just the other players that we were looking at there. It's just, for me, it's also tough. Like in those first 4 or 5 rounds, taking guys that just literally came out of nowhere, that have no draft capital, that kind of thing, when there's still receivers and stuff like that on the board where they're going to have a role. And I like Myles Gaskin. It's just like, and he's not like priced terrible or anything. Like when I talk about his projections in a minute, I mean, they're going to be right in line with the guys that are going, in that space. Some of it was just to do with the draft that we were in. We were dealing with the best ball. So there's a lot of different variables, that go into it. But folks, yeah, you can check out me basically saying I didn't want Myles Gaskin. Drake he's accurate in that statement in that particular draft. So real quick, before I jump into, the players and Gaskin, it's kind of tough because this is one of the offenses where I'm like, I don't really know what to think about it, because there's 2 coordinators that are working together, which, I mean, most coaches will tell you it's all a partnership anyway. All the coaches put into the game plan every week. And then ultimately, they're all giving feedback during the game. They're helping make the adjustments. There just happens to be one person on the headset, right, calling the plays. Different offensive coordinators have more control than others. But you've just got the situation now where you've got George Godsey and you've got Eric Studesville. So Godsey's going to be managing the passing game. Studesville's managing the ground game. It sounds like Godsey's going to be the guy to call plays. He's the passing game coordinator. He's got a long track record in the New England coaching tree. And so, I mean, that's part of how he came here under Brian Flores. But I mean, you can go back. He was under Josh McDaniel with Bill Belichick. He went up to Houston with Bill O'Brien. He spent time with Matt Patricia in Detroit. And then now he's, here with Flores. But, obviously in a lot of those stops, he was pass heavy, but a lot of that does depend on your quarterback as well. With O'Brien, he wasn't as pass heavy in the years that he didn't have a quarterback. So quarterbacks are really the number one driving factor in how you're going to approach your offense. And so that really brings us back to, a very key player, and that's just really Tua. What is Tua going to do in year 2? And I think that is the $1 million question for this offense. You hear people being pretty split on him for the price, without getting too deep in, where I've got him yet, but just his ADP, where it's sitting right now, I think he's an absolute buy. If you look at a lot of his metrics that I like to look at with Pro Football Focus, it wasn't pretty, but he was a rookie. So in a clean pocket, which is the most translatable sticky stat, right, from year to year, he graded 23 out of 32 starting quarterbacks. Under pressure, he was 27 out of 32. Positive graded throws, 22 out of 32. Negative graded throws, 26 out of 32, with the 26 being bad. Big time throw rate, only 30th out of 32. Turnover worthy plays, 25 out of 32. So typically, at least what you want to see, if somebody doesn't make a lot of big time throws, which are typically down the field, you're beating certain types of coverages at a key moment in a game, turnover worthy plays should be lower. But he was bad in turnover-worthy plays and bad in big-time throws. And his on-target throws, he was 25th out of 32. His accuracy, 28 out of 32. So that means it's within the frame of the receiver being able to catch it. His catchable inaccurate throws, meaning throws that his receivers caught, but they had to do extra work to make sure they caught it, 29 out of 32. Uncatchable, he was more in the middle of the league. So these are passes just no way a receiver couldn't have even caught it, like if they had a ladder. 27 out of 32. So he has a lot of work to do. And he throws to his first read 76% of the time. That's plus 7% over the NFL average. And so if you think about Tua coming out, some of the concerns were he played in such a great offense. He threw into such wide open windows. What would it look like when you go into the NFL? And some of this you just never can know. And I think we saw some of that show up last year. But at the same time, the Dolphins struggled with some injuries. Their receivers were not consistently healthy together. So there's a lot of different things going on. And again, he was still a rookie. He was coming off of a major injury, so that impacted, his ability in the offseason. So everything really hinges on him, Drake. But I will say at ADP, I feel good about Tua, where I've got him at, because this kind of sets everything up. I know you wanted me to go to Myles Gaskin. I'm sorry. But if you look at Tua and where I've got him at right now, I've got him at attempts 583. I've got him at 379 completions, 4,080 yards, 26 touchdown passes, and I've got him at 10 picks, which isn't bad. And a lot of people hear that and they're like, wow, that's pretty good. Remember, this is 17 games, not 16 games. So like this would be like the equivalent of, a 38 or 37, just over 3,700 yard season if we were looking at it against a 16 game season. But that puts him, and I've got him doing a little bit on the ground. I've got his total rushing yards at 255. Most of that coming off of scrambles, 234 yards of that coming off of scrambles. But I've got him with 3 rushing touchdowns. So, I mean, he's going to be right around the 300-point barrier. So he's going to be in the same stratosphere as like your Baker Mayfields. Closer, he could end up being closer to a guy like Joe Burrow than what some people think. So I like taking him late, and I like taking him in best ball because you can stack him, and we'll talk about the weapons, here in just a second. But you can easily stack. But real quick, hitting on Myles Gaskin, I've got him right at 50%, of the carries. He handled 60% or more of the snaps every week last year, so that's a positive. He did miss 9 through 12 games, 9 through 12, and games 14 and 15. And so in the games where he handled at least 60% of the snaps where he was fully healthy, he handled 56% of the attempts. He was in a route 55% of the time. He handled 15% of the targets. That's the number I really like, Drake. That's a healthy number. 79% of the 2-minute offense and 91% of the long down and distance offense. So last night when I said I was passing on him, you should have been like, Dwayne, look at your sheet and read it to me and tell me, what does it say? And who else did they sign? Who's going to take this work away? And I think it's a legit question, right? Because Salvon Ahmed did come on and do some things okay at the end of the year, but they did not use him in those situations when he was, even in the games where Gaskin was out. Ahmed did not take over the 2-minute offense with the long down and distance. They basically kept him off of the field in those situations. Now they did sign Malcolm Brown, like the ultimate fantasy buzzkill, like what he did to Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson last year. So it's an interesting sign, right? Why do you sign Malcolm Brown? I don't even know, unless maybe you're going to use him on some of the long down and distance. So it's not that I think Malcolm Brown is great, but that's the only thing that just has me just a little bit worried with Gaskin is, does he lose some of that work? Because where I really liked him was in the passing game. I think he's just an okay running back, to be honest. His efficiency wasn't anything crazy good. It was okay, but I liked his usage in the passing game. So he needs to retain that. And right now I'm fairly optimistic on him, Drake. I mean, I've got him at 239 carries, 955 yards rushing, 7 rushing touchdowns, 58 targets, 47 receptions, 350 yards receiving, and 2 receiving touchdowns. That's 230 fantasy points. Now again, 17-game season, that would be 218 in a 16-game season. For you folks used to thinking about 16-game seasons, I put that column there for me because I immediately want to think, well, what would that have meant like in a 16-game season? This is so weird doing 17 games. So that's a usable fantasy asset. The problem is the players that are going around him. And you guys, if you want to hear more about that, you can listen to the draft from last night. Drake and I talked through some of that and what's available there. As far as the receivers go, the way I'm looking at this offense, Drake, I think it's really going to be kind of like I don't think the offense is going to be ran like the Rams or like the Bengals, but I see it really being similar in that there's not going to be a target hog. I think this is going to be spread out across different guys. If I were to pick someone to lead the team in targets, I would bet on Devontae Parker. He and Tua did actually show some really good chemistry last year, even though his adjusted market share for just getting rid of the games he missed on the season puts him at 20% of the targets. But he averaged 25% of the targets in the games where he wasn't injured, and he averaged 26% of the targets in his 4 full games with Tua. He was Tua's number 1 target. So if I had to place a bet on the guy that's got the most chemistry, a guy that we've seen flash for over 1,000 yards receiving in the last 2 years. Yes, Devontae Parker up until now has been a disappointment, except for that one season, and he's often battling injuries. But I like last year that even though he had gotten his contract, he did try to play through those injuries a lot, Drake. So I give him a positive on that. You've got Will Fuller, who comes into the fold. I've got him and Jalen Waddle basically tied, right around 18% of the targets each. I've got Parker right at 20%. So I've got them really close. Already said Gaskins, I've got at 10%. And then you got Mike Gesicki, right? He's not just gonna go away. I mean, so I've got him at 15%. So if you look at these guys, they're all pretty close. They're all between 120 and 105 targets. Besides Mike Gesicki, which I've got at 87. All of their receptions are between 63 and 70. Gesicki, I've got at 57. Nobody over 1,000-yard receiving. I got 900 for Parker, 912 for Fuller. That's including him missing a game. Jalen Waddle, I've got at 750. So the way I see him working it is Devontae Parker is going to be the X doing everything. Will Fuller will be stretching the field, going deep. I think Jalen Waddle is going to be used more as a playmaker. They move all over the formation. Obviously, he can get deep, but he can also do a lot of damage with run after the catch, getting the ball quickly to him. And so I expect to see Waddle get a lot of those looks. So I've got his yards per catch, not because he's not explosive. I've got his lower than like Fuller and slightly lower than where I've got Parker. But I've got Waddle at 750 yards receiving and 5 receiving touchdowns. So that's 200 points for Parker, 185 points for Fuller. Waddle I've got right at 180. And then I've got, from the tight end perspective, 190 in a premium 1.5 point league, since we love the FFPC here, and then 161 in a normal PPR league for Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, we took Parker last night in this pros versus Joes. We got him in round 11. Right before he went right after Daryl Mooney, right before Henry Ruggs. That was the conversation you and I were having. And you asked me who to take between Ruggs and Parker. I went Parker. Miami as an offense didn't set the world on fire last year, and they still had Fitzpatrick, out there for a lot of time. Finished 21st in passing yards, 22nd in passing touchdowns, but we're top 10 in interceptions. So we have to cut that down this year. Let's move it along.
It really is all just about Tua.
Yeah,
but I do love Tua guys late if you can get them late.
Tua's going 18th round right now. Also, he's going back-to-back with Daniel Jones, who we're going to talk about here also.
Right. I would much rather take Tua at this point. And not that I'm against taking Daniel Jones again, especially like in a best ball type format. But for me, like with Tua, I just look at all the moves they made. You bring in Will Fuller, you get Waddle in the draft. You already had 2 other decent weapons on the team. You didn't worry about going and getting a better running back. I think this team is telling us that they want to throw the ball, you know? So, I mean, when I look at them at the highest level, like Miami, I've got them dropping back to pass 61% of the time and rushing 39% of the time. When you take out scrambles, you take out sacks on the passing, that puts it at 56% of their actual attempts being passes, and then 44% being rushing. I mean, so kind of balanced, but I mean, overall, still leaning more to the passing side. And I could see that being even more. Like I could see myself, by the time I learn more about their offense in the preseason, that number could bump up to like 62, 63%. But I think Tua's got to perform. That's the key, right? If he's struggling, they may have to protect him early on in the season until he can get his wheels under him and really get going.
Yeah, we had a question in our chat room, and we always encourage people, if you're watching us live on Twitch or on YouTube or Periscope, on Twitter, whatever, come into the chat room, talk. We have some great conversation to go on there. And he was guy Joe King said, so we should expect some shorter, quicker passes. When I look at these weapons, nothing about those weapons say shorter, quicker passes.
I think you're going to see a mix. Actually, I think Joe's right. I think what you're going to see is Fuller and Parker working more outside, stretching the boundary. Parker's going to run all levels of the field. He's going to operate underneath, intermediate, deep. He's going to do all of it. Fuller's going to operate more in the deep sector of the field, where I think you're going to see some more of the quick hitters will be underneath the Waddle.
All right. Hey, I like it. And, you saw us draft last night, and now you guys are all starting to come back into fantasy. We can see it in the numbers. Everyone's coming back, and you're going to get ready, and you're going to get your buddies together. You're going to do a live draft, hopefully this year. Maybe you're at a bar. Maybe you're in somebody's backyard. You're in a garage, basement. It doesn't matter, but you're going to need a draft board. This is where we come in to help you. We got a sick hookup for you this year, and it's all thanks to our buddies over at draftwithredzone.com. Go over there to draftwithredzone.com. Use our code FFHustle. It's going to save you $5. It's going to get you free shipping. You get the draft board, the stickers. You get a cheat sheet from a high-end fantasy site. It's not us, but it's guys we like, so you'll be okay with it. And here's what's really cool. You're going to get a championship ring. I'm showing it to our friends on YouTube and the stream right now. They engrave it for you. Ours on top of the box says FF Hustle Podcast, and you open up the ring box and you see this just super sick championship ring that says fantasy football, says champ on the side. I mean, this is really sharp and it's heavy duty. It's not some chintzy plastic thing. Thing feels like a Super Bowl ring. So go over there, draftwithredzone.com. Tell them we sent you. Use code FF Hustle, and you're going to be set to go. I got one, Dwayne. They sent me one. I'm using in my home draft. I'm nothing if not cheap. So I'm here to support the sponsors.
You just like it because it looks like the Eagles Super Bowl ring.
Oh, it's a carbon copy of the Eagles Super Bowl ring. If you guys want to know what the ring looks like, Google the Eagles Super Bowl ring. It's the exact same thing, except instead of Philadelphia Eagles, it says fantasy football champion. So how about we go to a team that's still looking for some Super Bowl wins, and that's in Minnesota, who the Eagles beat in the NFC title game on the way to win their Super Bowl. So it's not often you skip over the second pick in the draft, but I want to start here, Dwayne, with the wide receiver group, and that's because Dalvin Cook, unless you have a top 3 pick, you're not going to get him. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about him. We'll give you Dwayne's projections. But
Dalvin Cook's good. How about that?
Yeah. This is one of our favorite wide receiver groups to talk about on the show. And they're coming off a season where Adam Thielen caught 14 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson was the rookie of the year. And just how good was he? Dude caught 88 balls for 1,400 yards, averaged nearly 16 yards of reception. They finished 6th. This is a fun stat. They finished 6th in passing touchdowns while being bottom 8 in pass attempts. So I'd love to get your outlook for those two guys, and then we'll sprinkle in a little late tight end Irv Smith talk, because I know you've been hyping him up for 2 years.
Yeah. Well, you've got a new coordinator, but really the same coordinator. You now have Clint Kubiak instead of Gary Kubiak. So I expect the offense to look very similar over the last 2 years. The problem with, the Vikings is just, man, they do not run a lot of plays. It's the slow pace is really what hurts them. They also are not geared. They really need to win games and be able to stay close or be ahead in games, because they're not geared to really come from behind. They just don't have a third receiver on their team. If you look at their personnel last year, Drake, they ran 11 personnel, 28.1%. That's last in the NFL by far. I mean, 28.1%. That's like going back to like 1975 and how much a team would run 11 personnel. They run 12 personnel. So getting back to your Smith comment, 22.1% of the time. That's one of the highest in the league. Actually, maybe number one. I don't have it written down. 21 personnel, 26.9%. So that is, what do you get there? 48, almost 49% of the time, they either have an extra tight end or a fullback on the field. That tells you what kind of offense we're dealing with. And so what's good about that, though, for the receivers is it's really a condensed group of targets. Ultimately, Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen don't have to deal with some little small slot receiver being open all the time and mismatches. It's them, and then the tight end is expected to create those mismatches in this offense. So Kirk Cousins, we don't say a lot about Kirk Cousins, but I mean, we've talked about it pretty much every year. I know people love to bash on Kirk Cousins, but the dude is just he's really underrated. I know he's not been great, trying to win games, coming from behind, and all those kind of things. And I'm not going to argue with any of those things, but I mean, the guy he's highly accurate. If he gets off script, he's not the greatest, but if you can put him in an offense like this and let him just do his thing, like Kirk Cousins is what Kyle Shanahan hoped he was getting in Jimmy Garoppolo. Kirk Cousins is actually that player. So
this is a top 12 quarterback last year. That's all I have to say. Fantasy football, QB 11.
For Cousins, I've got 4,400 yards, 32 touchdowns, 11 picks. Not much on the ground. He doesn't give you much there, but right around 310 fantasy points. So Tua, we just covered, was just slightly under that. Baker's right there around that. A lot of these guys that are in this kind of scheme, I've got close with where Cousins is. Derek Carr is slightly below him. Tannehill gets ahead of him because of the legs, right, and what he can do on the ground. And Tannehill can, have some of those games where, he pops for the really big numbers. And
we drafted him last night. Let's hope he does.
Cousins can do that too. The problem is, from a fantasy asset standpoint, we also have seen this team get ahead, and they're like, 15 passing attempts. Who cares? Let's just keep running the ball. We're going to win the game running the ball when they jump out to a lead. So Dalvin Cook, like you said, I'm not going to talk a lot about the guy. Nobody needs me to help them, but I mean, he averages a touchdown on 5.1% of his attempts. Avoids a tackle on 22% of his carries. Rushes of 10 yards or more, 4.2% and 5.2% over the last 2 years. Yards after contact, 3.3, 3.1. Like, he does everything really well. And if you watch Dalvin Cook play, you just see it. Like the guy works angles. He's got the speed. He's in the passing game. So again, I don't have to belabor the point. But 320 carries, 1,400 yards, 16 rushing touchdowns. Yes, I did say 16 because he's so good at it. And this offense loves to run the ball inside the 5. And they've slowly invested in the offensive line. 13% of the targets for 69 targets, 59 receptions, 470 yards receiving, and 2 receiving touchdowns. That's 355 fantasy points. Yes, as Drake says, you're either in the top 2 picks and you get him, or you are not. So moving to the receivers, Justin Jefferson. What was interesting with Jefferson, the first 3 weeks, or first couple of weeks, they were just kind of, because remember the news in training camp was, well, Justin Jefferson's not a starter. And so he kind of fell to the bottom of deep drafts, or wasn't getting drafted at all. He was my number 1 picked up player last year in FFPC. I think I added into over half my squads. I basically went for broke in week 2 because I watched him play after that game. And I was like, this dude's legit. Like, I have no doubt I'm going for it. And so I put a lot of my money on him. But if you look at him just after those first, or from week 3 on. So get rid of the first 2 games where they were just kind of being like, hey, you're still a rookie. We're not going to put you on the field all the time. So these are the games where he averaged at least 90% of the routes. He had a 28% target share after just getting rid of those couple of games, averaging 9.6 targets per game over the last 8 games. 20% of the end zone targets. We'll talk about Thielen there in a minute. That's where he gets the love. 25% of his targets came on play action, which is 2% better than the NFL average. And he was the first read on his targets 81% of the time. That's plus 5% versus the NFL average. This is the benefit of playing in an offense where you don't use 3 wide receivers that often. Hayden Winks wrote a really good article on this probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, talking about why yards per route ran is going to be higher for 2 wide sets versus 3 wide sets, and why we should evaluate those. It's a really good article if you haven't read it. We're working on trying to get Hayden on the show. We just haven't been able to make schedules work, but that's a really good article, and one of the things that prompted me to want to have him come on. So you're seeing that show up evident right here in the Minnesota Vikings offense. And so Thielen, kind of the forgotten guy, right? Justin Jefferson's going to cost you a 2nd-round pick, maybe a 3rd-round pick this season. You'll see him slip around to the 3rd-round turn. He was averaging 30% target share before he missed the week, Drake, where it was due to COVID. Then he fell to 18% over the rest of the season. But he did handle 50% of the end zone targets on the season. So I don't know for sure. I was going back and looking, and I didn't have a chance to look real close right before the show. Someone in the chat may be able to tell us. I don't remember Thielen having COVID. I thought he was just exposed. So there could be literally nothing to this. I just wrote it down. I jotted the note down. It's like after he missed that game, he literally fell off the face of the planet. He went from averaging 30% of the targets to only 18% of the targets. So something to keep an eye on. But a guy that I think, when I look at where he's going in the 4th and 5th round, I'm very comfortable, Brian, with him in that range. So I've got those 2 receivers, both with healthy numbers. I've got Justin Jefferson at 133 targets, Thielen at 117, 90 receptions for Jefferson for 1,350 yards, 8 touchdowns. I've got Thielen at 80 receptions, 990 yards, and 9.5 touchdowns, just due to he's always targeted inside the 5, inside the 20. He's very heavily targeted by Kirk Cousins. And then we'll talk about Irv Smith Jr. Now, the thing with Irv Smith Jr., there's been this news of, well, Conklin, is going to play just as much as Kyle Rudolph did. And that could very well, be the case. So that's got some folks a little bit concerned. So if you look at, Irv Smith, he averaged 16% target share in the last 3 games with Kyle Rudolph out. His snaps jumped 83 to 83%. His routes jumped to 80%. So those are really healthy. You want to be, if you get a tight end that's up in those 80% ranges, that's really good. So I'm still fairly bullish on Irv Smith. I do think that Conklin's going to see some work too. But remember, I would rather have Conklin on the field than be dealing with, a slot receiver that Irv Smith's got to worry about. So everything's like relative. So I don't think Conklin is this terrible thing, because I think it's not like Irv Smith's going to be off of the field a lot for Conklin, which was the case with Kyle Rudolph. Rudolph would be out there without Irv Smith. Now what I think you're going to see is Conklin becomes the guy working in like Irv Smith was, but Irv Smith is the primary tight end. And I think in that scenario, we still see a bump in target shares for Irv Smith this year. So I've got him right now right at that 16% mark where he was for the end of last season. And Conklin did get some targets, down the stretch. And I think that's the thing that has a lot of people scared off. But when I look at the way the playing time was divvied up and who was staying on the field more, it was Irv Smith. So I think that plays out, to his advantage. But for Irv Smith, I've got him at 85 targets, 62 receptions, 717 yards receiving, and 5.5 touchdowns. That's 199 points in a premium tight end league. That is 168 points in a PPR league.
Now, you want to see what sharp drafters are doing. I'm looking at the Football Guys Players Championship ADP from the past week, and this is a tight end premium league. So these are guys who want tight ends and multiple tight ends. So Irv Smith, maybe this is skewed a little high, but I just want you guys to focus on who Irv Smith is being taken ahead of by some smart drafters. He's going in the end of the 9th round. He's going ahead of Evan Ingram, Jonnu Smith, Adam Troutman, Gerald Everett, Hunter Henry, Blake Jarwin, even Zach Ertz and Gronk.
He belongs.
That's surprising to
me. He belongs ahead of all of those guys. I think you could put Ingram. I think you could put Ingram right there close with him. I consider those two, to be pretty tight. Ingram's going to have the same problem because now Kyle Rudolph goes to his team. So we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
So Irv Smith loses Kyle Rudolph and Evan Ingram picks up Kyle Rudolph. So we can make a tie into that in a minute. That would have been a great segue if they were actually our next team. Like you would have given me a high five after the show because I'm not very good at segues like you.
Yeah, we're gonna leave the Giants at the end. I could care less about the Giants. I'll be refreshing that. Okay. I'll be refreshing my my beer. A question in the chat room, as a gang. See, I like when people ask me questions for once. Brian, what kind of beer are you drinking tonight? It is a Sierra Nevada Summer Break, a lighter IPA. I can't get all boozed up during these shows. I'll be like laying over and slurring. The Giants are up next, like Jeff the Drunk from the Stern Show.
I'm pretty sure everyone here would enjoy one show where we just let you do that. And you sounded like Ron Burgundy just then.
Do you remember? It was like a Christmas episode because it's when I sit in the corner of my man cave with the Christmas tree behind me, and you got bombed during that show.
I did.
You were like throwing F-bombs. You're like, F this guy. Nobody cares about him. Like, Dwayne, what do you think? We're doing our usual
your
shtick.
Favorite show of mine ever, probably.
Yeah, it's like, hey, Dwayne, what do you think of T.Y. Hilton this week? Who gives a shit? T.Y. Hilton sucks. Whoa, all right. I like where the show's going. So, very, very cool stuff there. So that's what I'm drinking tonight. What about you, Dwayne? What are you sipping on?
Modelo Especial with some lime. It's one of my summer go-tos. Fell in love with this one a long time ago. So
if you can get that in a can, that's my hot tub beer right there. Is the Modelo.
I do get into it. I do get it in a can for whenever I go to the beach, which I'll be in Destin next week. So any of you fantasy football hustlers, if you're going to be in Destin next week, let me know and I'll see if we can find you. But the last 3 or 4 years, because I just used to be just where I didn't want to drink it out of a can. I was like, no, I only drink that beer out of a bottle. And I figured out, once you have 2 or 3, it doesn't matter, Drake. It all tastes good. It's a good beer in a can. It's still good.
See, I'm like a beer. I used to be kind of a beer snob. I was a beer salesman. Now I'm a liquor salesman. I have now almost exclusively changed over to wanting beers in the can. And beer can. A lot of craft brewers went that way, not to get all nerding out on you, but because it's much cheaper to buy the aluminum because it's cheaper to ship than it is the glass, blah, blah, blah. But I love it. I love the can now. I was going to say I love it in the can, and I know someone's going to take it.
It's funny, like Miller Lite, I prefer in a can. My dad loves it in a bottle.
Yeah.
I'm different beers I'm different with. So it just depends.
Yeah, don't think we're not doing a show for you guys next week just because Dwayne's on vacation. We'll have
one in the can.
Yeah,
and we talked about this last year. Maybe we'll try it if we find the right night. Where you mentioned last year, hey dude, let's just like have you on the beach. Just do it from your phone. Let's do just a quick 30 minutes. Like just ask Dwayne one of those Ask Dwayne anythings. Yeah, and I'll make sure that I'm blitzed for it, Drake.
We'll see what we can do. But yeah, next week we're gonna get into Jets, Eagles, Seahawks, and down the line. So if we're doing an Eagles show,
I'll get some family members on the show. Yeah,
yeah. Well, if you're a Patriots fan, you were drinking heavily last year. Shout out to my my liquor store hookup, Mickey Hogan, and the Shop City Liquor Store, big Patriots fan. 2020 was a mess in New England, to say the least. So the offense sucked. To say the offense sucked, though, Dwayne, is an insult to anything that has ever sucked. This Cam Newton-led offense, get ready for some fun numbers. They finished 31st in pass attempts, 30th in passing yards, 31st in completions, dead last in passing touchdowns. They just simply couldn't move the ball down the field. And they were 31st in deep pass attempts, which is anything over 20 yards. And their horrendous wide receiver group was bottom 7 in receiving yards after the catch. All right, we get the picture. All right, let's look to 2021. Cam's back, but they also spent a first-round pick on Alabama QB Mac Jones. And then they went out and spent like drunken sailors in free agency, acquiring not one Dwayne, but 2 elite tight ends in Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. And I guess we can say they revamped their wide receiver group by adding Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne. So, Dwayne, I've thrown a shit sandwich on the table for you. Now make filet mignon out of it for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll have to see what's going to happen with the quarterbacks. But I think either way, I still expect, even though they've added these weapons, I think it's still a run heavy to run balanced scheme. So when I say run heavy, it could be up to 50% run. If I say run balance, it's more like, 45-ish%, running plays. And so I think what you're going to see is they're going to use a lot of 12, obviously, because they have Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. That'll probably replace a lot of the 21 sets that they used last year. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at receiver because now you have Kendrick Bourne, you have Nelson Aguilar. I think Aguilar, we all know, is going to be the guy that's going to stretch the field, will probably be on the field all the time. We've got to figure out, is Jacoby Myers or Kendrick Bourne going to play the Z receiver? Because whoever's playing Z and then kicking into and you can still kick into the slot, right, in the 3 wide sets. And again, like not like we're drafting a lot of these guys, but you're wanting to throw a dart late. Like it makes it hard for me right now because I don't know which guy it's going to be because they're going to run so much 12 personnel. Probably about half of their plays will come from 12 personnel, assuming Hunter Henry can stay healthy and Jonnu Smith are healthy. That means that you're in the 11 grouping not very often. So how often will really 3 wide receivers be on the field? So that's what worries me about Jacoby Myers. I think Aguilar is safe. He's going to be out there. He's going to help be an accent player to the play action. They work behind the linebackers with the tight ends off of play action, and then they'll also have Aguilar pushing the safeties off, pushing the cornerbacks off, like depending on what type of coverage they're in. And he's also obviously always an option that you can hit deep. It's interesting how Aguilar has kind of transformed himself in the last 3 to 4 years into kind of a big play guy. When we used to think of him more as a guy that operated around the scrimmage, run after the catch, that kind of thing. And he's gotten better at that skill set. The offensive line, they brought Trent Brown back, so we'll see what happens there. They did lose guard Joe Thuney. Hey, Rex Burkhead's gone. You don't have to worry about Rex Burkhead anymore. They drafted another running back, Ramondre Stevenson. So again, we're probably gonna have a stable of backs. Good point here. Someone just said projecting New England stats must feel like guessing. Yes, this is one of the teams that feels closer to guessing. Anytime you have a potential quarterback split, your first pass at the projections are always a little looser. I've still got Cam Newton playing 65% of the snaps, 35% to Mac Jones. I could easily switch that. I could easily get it to 100% Mac Jones and 0% Cam Newton based on what we're hearing and what we're seeing in the preseason. This is my guess right now, and I would just call it a guess. I read everything I could on the situation. I just know this. Cam Newton's a highly competitive guy. He's been playing in this league a long time. They can still use his legs. So I think if he comes out and it's even close, I think they'll stick with him as the veteran, give Mac Jones a year to learn. Again,
this is a team that can make the playoffs.
It's just stuff based off of what I've read. It doesn't mean that it's going to be right. And again, this one will probably be revisiting and changing. But between the two, that's really all people care about. When I add them together, you've got 3,724 yards passing. That's not good in a 17-game season. You got 22 passing touchdowns, also not good. You've got 12 interceptions. Now, where Cam can, and why Cam's the better option for fantasy is because he can give you the yardage on the ground. So I've got him right now with a total of 477 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. I mean, the guy scored double-digit rushing touchdowns last year. So if he can take over the job, that's who I still prefer for the year, just because you get the added bonus of the rushing. If I knew Cam Newton was going to be the 17-game starter or even 15, 16-game starter, I would easily be drafting Cam Newton at the end of best ball drafts right now. I just can't say for sure that that's going to happen. Talking about the rest of the skill players, Drake. So Damian Harris is a name that you hear a lot of people excited about.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people on Twitter saying, "Oh, Damian Harris is going to get more of the passing work. He's going to get more of this." I doubt it. I just doubt it. I think James White, is still going to be the dude. So if you look at, let's just start with James White, right? James White, if you look at him last year, he handled almost all the 2-minute offense and almost all the long down and distance offense. He's done that for years in this offense. So I don't think that's going to change. They trust him in that role. They like him in that role. So the only way Damian Harris is going to get more targets and more receptions is if they suddenly decide on first and second down to target him more. Now, you could have the Rex Burkhead leaving. Who is it bumping up? It's probably it could bump James White and Damian Harris up a little bit, but we still don't know what's going to happen with Sony Michel. We still don't know what they're going to do with Ramondre Stevenson. I'm going to have to practice saying the name. It's not really that hard, Dwayne. But this is just a backfield that's always used a committee. Now, having said that, if I had to pick one, it is Damian Harris, and I am willing, to spend a pick on him. And I like where he's going still, right? I don't know if you have his ADP up in front of you right now, Drake, for FFPC, but it's not bad. It's not a bad, I want to say it's like 7th or 8th round.
Damian Harris?
Yeah. So while you're looking for that, I'll run off the projections, but I've got him at 43% of the attempts. Now, remember, I just told you Cam Newton's got a decent amount because I got 42% to Harris. I still have 17% to Sony Michel. He could easily go away. 15% of the attempts to James White. The rest of that, you guys are all good at math. That doesn't add to 100%. Well, that's because the rest of it's going to Cam Newton. So 217 attempts for Harris. I've got him at 975 yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. I do expect him to carry most of the work inside the 5. The problem is if Cam Newton's on the field, he gets more of the inside the 5 work than anyone. So Mac Jones as the starter could actually help Damian Harris.
Big time. So
if Mac Jones became the starter and now you don't have to worry about Cam Newton down inside the 5, I would give Damian Harris a bump. Right now, I've got Damian Harris, setting at 6.5 touchdowns. If I found out that Cam Newton is not going to be playing quarterback, it's all going to be Mac Jones, then that's easily going to get Damian Harris up into the 8-9 touchdown range. Mm-hmm. Now we'll have to keep an eye in camp on Stevenson, have to keep an eye on what do they do with Michel. There's speculation they'll just cut him. And if that happens, then you really got to look at Stevenson. If you could get it just down to a 2-back backfield of Harris and White and Cam Newton not being the starting quarterback, then you could probably get some value out of this backfield. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, it's just still a tough backfield for me to trust. So I've got Damian Harris at 172 points, but I've got James White at 170, Drake. I've got them right there together. James White is a 14th round pick. I think he picks up a good portion of what Burkhead was doing from a receiving standpoint. So, again, we'll have to keep an eye on Stevenson. And who knows, the Patriots turn guys into different things. All of a sudden, Michel could get used like he did in college where he was used a little bit more, in the
Jonnu Smith in the backfield.
Who knows? Yeah, who knows? So, but the thing is, with James White, he's got upside in his targets if he usurps, some of the Burkhead role. I've got him, Burkhead leaves 14% of the attempts and 7% of the team's targets on the table. My guess is a good chunk of those targets end up going over to James White, who I've got at 15% of the targets right now, which he's done multiple times in his career. But there could be a scenario where James White is like around 18, 19%, target share. You could see each one of those receivers somewhere between 15, 18% target, and each one of the tight ends. You could see them all just kind of being like jumbled together. James White gets help if it's Mac Jones, right? Not as good when it's Cam Newton, because Cam Newton's more likely to take off. Now, we did see Cam Newton support tons of passes to Christian McCaffrey, so it's not like he's not willing to do it. So you just have to keep that in mind. So with White, I've got him at 300 yards rushing, 3 rushing touchdowns, but I've got him with 61 receptions, 500 yards receiving, and 2 receiving touchdowns, which gets him close to Damian Harris, because receptions are the cheat code, right? These are PPR stats that I'm throwing at you guys. If you're looking at a half-point PPR, it's 162 for Harris. It drops down to 139 for James White. And if you're looking at a non-PPR, which I don't know that exists anymore, but it's 152 points for Damian Harris and 109 for James White. I should probably talk about those things more often, Drake. I typically just look at PPR. But if you're playing in PPR, James White, I've got graded right there with Harris. The further you move away from PPR, the more Damian Harris's value is differentiated and separated from James White. So receivers, I've got Aguilar leading the way with 17% of the targets, but they're going to be deep shots. A lot of it will be deep. So his catch rate's not going to be high. I've got his catch rate at 57%. That's 50 receptions, 750 yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. That's 151 fantasy points in a PPR scoring format. I've got Kendrick Bourne and Jacoby Myers both right there together. I really don't know which way this is going to go, guys. So I just basically have it split. We'll change this at some point. But I really just don't want to spend that much more time on this offense. So I'm moving on from the receivers, and I'm just going to talk about Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. I have both at 15% of the targets. And I've got them both right around 600 yards receiving, both of them right around 5 receiving touchdowns. That's 164 points in a premium, 138 in a normal PPR, 112 and a half-point PPR. I do expect Hunter Henry to work a little deeper down the field, work the seams. I think Jonnu Smith will work more underneath. They'll try to get the ball into his hands quicker, let him run after the catch.
Jonnu Smith in a tight end premium league is tight end 15 off the board. He's going in the middle of the 10th round. Hunter Henry, tight end 18, going at the end of the 11th. We asked about Damian Harris. He is the penultimate pick of round 7. He goes off at 7-11. He is running back 32 currently in the Football Guys Players Championship.
So he's a great 0 RB kind of guy, or you went one running back early, took a bunch of receivers and a tight end and a quarterback, and then you got to come back and hit a few guys. I think Damian Harris is definitely in the mix if that's the type of team that you're wanting to build. And you're going to deal with variance with Damian Harris. You're going to have a 20-point week, and then you're going to have a 3-point week. But it is what it is. In best ball, it's a lot better than it is in season long, because in best ball, hopefully you have, you just got, a roster full of anywhere from 4 to 6 backs, and, you just get as good weeks. You don't have to worry about the bad.
And let's say you're a Patriots fan who is burning his Tom Brady jersey and you need something new to wear. I want you to go over to our Twitter feed at FF Hustle. The pinned tweet brings you to our swag store. That's what I'm calling it. It's all our apparel from Viridian Global: hats, hoodies, t-shirts, stickers, you name it. We should get lunch boxes with Dwayne's face on it, all kinds of fun stuff. Just go over there to Viridian Global. It's our pinned tweet at FF Hustle, and check out some of our cool stuff. A team that might not be making the playoffs anytime soon because they don't have a quarterback are the New Orleans Saints. And we are officially in the post-Drew Brees era. He's going to be calling Notre Dame football games, and he's in the studio for Sunday Night Football and, making Subway commercials, whatever else he does. We don't exactly know who's going to fill in for him between Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, and that's going to kind of cloud what we think of New Orleans going into 2021, and specifically Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. Now, we know Kamara, super stud, but if Taysom Hill's the quarterback, we're going to see him vulturing goal line rushes, and we have no idea what it's going to look like in the passing game because Hill does not check down. I believe there's one game where he actually finally threw the couple of passes to Alvin Kamara, but we'll see what Sean Payton can do, maybe scheme some stuff up. And Michael Thomas, Dwayne, he went from a first-round pick a year ago to a guy who only played in 7 games and caught 40 balls. His current FFPC ADP is round 3, pick 2. That is wide receiver 6. So people in this past week are still buying high on Michael Thomas.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about Thomas here in a minute. I don't necessarily mind the buying on Thomas. The guy that you hit on that I think is really, kind of hanging in the balance here is Alvin Kamara, because you have to spend pick number 3 or 4 to get him. And I do think that his value is very much tied to who becomes the starting quarterback here. And I tweeted a little bit about this weekend, but the more and more I dug into it, the more I just really feel like Taysom Hill is going to be their starter. I think, Jameis Winston has a lot of turnover issues. Sean Payton does not like that. That's what he loved about Drew Brees. Even when Drew Brees' skills deteriorated, he knew he could still win football games by going to more of a run-balanced approach, what they've really been for like the last 3 years, protecting Brees, letting him be efficient, not get sacked, not turn the ball over. And that's really what – he didn't kill drives. Drew Brees did not kill drives. I know he got made fun of a lot, but he did some things really elite, such as not getting sacked, getting the ball out. Little things that can kill drives that a lot of people don't think about. Drew Brees was doing well. Was he pushing the ball down the field and making all these great throws? No, he wasn't. But he was beating the other team with his mind, and he wasn't allowing the Saints to beat themselves. And so now when you look at what you have with Jameis Winston, I just don't know. I just wonder, Drake, can Jameis Winston, really turn into what Sean Payton wants? The other area of the field that Jameis Winston has struggled with is a lot of the intermediate and shorter stuff. Like he can be inconsistent, in those areas of the field. A lot of the Saints offense has been built around that. Now, that's not to say that they wouldn't adapt the offense to fit really their quarterback, right? That could very well happen. They could just turn all those routes, those same concepts, but they are all just a little bit deeper. So I'm not saying Winston doesn't have a chance to win the role, and I would actually prefer Winston to win the role from a standpoint of what that would mean for Kamara. And I think Michael Thomas can be isolated with either one. But I just don't know, for whatever reason, Drake, just as I studied it and looked at it more and more and more, I got more and more concerned. Because if you look at it now, Taysom Hill's got his own warts. He was sacked on 9% of his snaps last season, or on 9% of his dropbacks. That's like one of the worst in the league. When you get sacked 10% of the time, that's really bad. So you know that Taysom Hill is still trying to figure out. He's trying to figure out how to process the game. He's still learning the game. Winston, he averages about 6%, right, of sacks. Drew Brees was 3%. So it's just very, very different. And then if you look at, touchdowns per attempt, even though Brees was kind of, thought of as, oh, wow, Drew Brees isn't very good. He's been a 6% plus touchdown per attempt rate guy, for multiple years in a row. He's been 6 to 6.5%, which is really good. It's better than 80% of the quarterbacks in the league on a year-to-year basis. You look at Jameis and you look at Taysom Hill, they're more in the 4% range. So it's going to be interesting, to see what they do with the offense. But right now, this is similar to the Patriots, trying to figure out who's going to be the starter here. And right now, as I projected it, I left Winston with a slight lead, but I've got it pretty close. I've got Winston at 10 games and Taysom Hill at 7 games. But I think I'm just going to leave it for now. But my gut is saying it's going to be Taysom Hill. And so I want to hear some more. Let's see what starts to happen in camp. But I just worry about Jameis. He's going to be back there getting sacked. He's going to be back there throwing picks. Just how much is Sean Payton going to be willing to go through that? And I think even if Winston starts, I think he will be on a short leash, because I think Payton knows that he can come out and run. He can use this run-heavy scheme with Taysom Hill and still, just play keep away and win games. And he knows that he's got a decent defense, and that he can scheme up enough stuff to make it work on offense. He just can't be dealing with digging themselves out of big holes. Because the other thing is, really, the Saints, are they built to even handle that kind of a game script? They have a possession receiver, really, in Michael Thomas, who's really great at it. He's elite at it. and they have a running back that's the next best target in their offense. Tre'Quan Smith's never really shown us anything. Maybe he could be good. Adam Troutman could be good, but again, an unknown. It's not like they have this offense that you would just say, wow, yeah, they could just go out there and throw it all day long, and they're just going to cause mismatches all over the field. And, because I think a lot of people think about Jameis Winston and are like, well, I remember the days that Drew Brees threw for 5,000 yards. And that's certainly true. But I just don't know that you've got all the right weapons here. I think you're one weapon shy of having an offense like that. I think you could do it if you had Kamara and then you had, Michael Thomas plus, because back in the day, right, it was Marquise Colston plus Jimmy Graham plus Darren Sproles. And then you had a field stretcher, whether it was Devery Henderson or whether it was who was their first round pick out of Tennessee way back when that never turned in anything. Anyway, can't think of him, but he just basically turned into a field stretcher type guy. But I think they're basically a weapon short from really being a shootout type. Robert Meacham. Bam, nailed it, Drake. That's who it was. So I'm just starting to lean more to Taysom Hill. So where I've got the team though right now, let's just talk just for a second about Alvin Kamara, because that's really the big story here. So if you look at Kamara, it looks good because he averaged 12% targets in the 4 full games with Taysom Hill. You're like, oh, what? Well, that's fine. I mean, 12% is okay. Well, remember, number one, we're talking about a guy that we want to be around 20%, right? We don't want him to be at 12%. And if you further break it down, here it is by game: 5%, 8%, 8%, 28%. That 5%, 8%, and 8%, when you're only getting about 40% of the rushing attempts, is not enough in fantasy football to be worth, a top 6 pick. And Alvin Kamara is very efficient. Like if you look at look at the touchdowns that he scores. I mean, he scores a lot of touchdowns, but again, touchdowns can be fluky, even though he's had years where he's big and then he's had years where he's right around the average. So you can't just count on Kamara scoring, 16 rushing touchdowns. And remember, he had a huge game at the end of the season, and not to take it away from him. I mean, he still did great, but I mean, he got 4 right at the end. Right. And believe me, I remember it cost me a lot of money in FFPC when Alvin Kamara went freaking nuts. I'm texting Drake. I'm like, what the hell? You've got to be kidding me. This is like insane. So I've got Kamara right now. I'm kind of splitting the difference. He's normally around a 20% target guy. He was around a 12% with Taysom. It could be even worse. It could be a little better because he still is the second best option on the team. There is part of you that would have to have logic that says, look, he's got to figure out how to throw the ball in to Kamara. Maybe Taysom Hill finally figured that out in that last game where he peppered him with 28% of the targets. I could say that's in the range of outcomes too, but I'm splitting the difference for right now. I've got him at 16.5% of the targets. So that's 84 targets for 67 receptions, 570 yards receiving, 2.5 receiving touchdowns. I've got him at 218 attempts. That's 42.5% of the carries, which is right around where he typically is. I've got him almost 5 yards per carry, which I do not hand out very often. He and Nick Chubb are the two guys sitting right at that for me now. So I've got him over 1,000 yards rushing, like right at 1,050, and I've got him at 11 rushing touchdowns. So that's still over 300 fantasy points in a 17-game season in a PPR. That would have been 291 last year in a PPR. And a half point, that's 275. And a non-PPR, this is for you, Shirley, that's 241. Latavius Murray. So folks are like, oh, well, great. Latavius Murray must really be getting a bump. No, not really. A lot of this, because people saw that I had them being the tweet I put out is my prediction is they actually have more rushing plays than passing plays this year. And it's just because a lot of that comes back to sacks, because sacks turn passing plays, right? They take away passing plays because they don't now show up as an attempt. And then scrambles turn into rushing plays as an attempt. So when you're just talking about attempts, sacks get taken out and scrambles turn into rushing attempts. So that's really where my statement around that came from. From a pure drop back versus run plays, yes, I still expect the Saints to drop back to pass more often. But Latavius Murray, I've got at 166 carries, 707 yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns. Got him right around 20 receptions, right around 150 yards receiving, and a receiving touchdown. Michael Thomas. So Michael Thomas, 6 healthy games down the stretch. 2 were with Brees, 4 were with Taysom Hill. over that full 6 games, if you looked at it, 50 targets, 37 receptions, 421 yards, the biggest issue is 0 touchdowns. But again, touchdowns can be a bit fluky. We see that. But if you extrapolate that full 6 games out, that's 133 targets, 99 receptions, 1,125 yards over 16 games. If you look at just his 4 games with Taysom only, this is what makes me feel good about Michael Thomas and the fact that I think he's insulated either way. 37 targets, 30 receptions, 343 yards. If you extrapolate that out, which we're getting is a small sample, but just work with me. If you extrapolate that out, that's 148 targets, 120 receptions, 1,372 receiving yards, 0 touchdowns. That's a 37% target share. That's what he had with Taysom Hill. So I think Michael Thomas is safe. I think what you have to worry about with Michael Thomas is the touchdown passes. Are they going to go down? Is the offense going to have as many plays due to turnovers, sacks, drives killed? All those sort of things could work against him.
That's the key right there. And I think that's going to impact Alvin Kamara and his triple-digit target number is how many less drives and less plays the Saints are running this year because they're not getting the Drew Brees effect, him picking up first downs and sustaining drives. And I don't think you're going to have that this year. And I think it's going to play a big role in those two guys' fantasy fortunes.
Yeah, it could. And what's interesting is even teams that their first down rates go, sometimes they keep their play volumes similar, but the quality of the plays are on the wrong end of the field. So your expected points, off of those snaps are lower. There's a lot of different implications, but you're hitting it basically on the head. Like, it's just the quality of the offense. Can it stay the same? And I don't think we can say that confidently. Is there a chance the offense gets even better? Yeah. I think if for some reason Jameis Winston can totally get it together, that's the way that the whole offense becomes better from a fantasy perspective. I just worry that Taysom Hill is going to have too much of a say in that, and I just worry about Jameis turning the ball over. So right now I've got Michael Thomas is still fine to me as a 3rd-round pick. He's 153 targets, 103 receptions, 1,239 yards receiving, and 6 receiving touchdowns. He's never been like this huge touchdown guy. He's had, like a spike year, but he's really more like an Allen Robinson type. And so he's going right around where Allen Robinson goes. So I think he's actually priced right. I just worry there's not a ton of upside on the bone for Michael Thomas, but I don't think there's the downside that some people are thinking about. So anytime I can get a player that I think is pretty much a lock to get 150 targets, no matter what happens, even in a 17-game season versus a 16-game season, I feel good about it. That's 261 points in a PPR, would have been 246 in a 16-game season, 210.5 point and 158 points in a non-PPR league. And I'll be honest with you, Drake, I have no clue what to do with the rest of this offense. We're going to have to learn more about them. I've got Traquan Smith right now at 15% of the targets. If you look at him last year in the games where he played at least 75% of the snaps. So he missed weeks 2 through 7 and weeks 14 through 16. He had other games leading into those. So he missed 2 through 7, meaning he didn't play all of week 1. He didn't play all of week 13. And so I just isolated down just to the games where he at least played 75% of the snaps and he had a 15% target share. So that's where I put him for now. I've got him at 15%. I will say there's potentially some upside for him though, right? He could get to 17, 18%. But again, we're talking about a guy, it's not like he's going into his 2nd year, right? Is this is his 4th or his 5th year now? I don't have it written down in front of me, but is his 4th or his 5th year? I know it's not his 2nd or his 3rd. Not to say he couldn't do something here, but I've got him for 50 grabs, 700 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And then the next guy everybody wants to know about is Adam Troutman. I've got him at 50. Troutman, I always just think of the dude that's like Rambo's like leader. What is Rambo's boss's name? It's Troutman, right? Isn't that like he tells the guy, hey, they drew first blood. Anyway, Drake's like,
I don't think I've ever seen a full Rambo.
You've never seen Rambo?
Dude, there's so many movies I could tell you that I've never seen the full movie of. Like, as I just dropped my pen there, I've never seen the full Godfather, any of them. Die Hard, never seen.
Okay. We're going to have to work on this. Come on, you got it. Anyway, so the Troutman, somebody in the audience knows the Troutman thing, but you don't. No. So I've got him at 71 targets, 46 receptions, 560 yards receiving, and 4 touchdowns. I do think, though, like Troutman's one of those guys that you have to say does have the upside. He can be, I think Thomas and Kamara are still up there, as you got to say for now. Thomas obviously is going to get the most target share. I've got him at 30%. I've got Kamara at 16.5% right now. I've got Troutman and Traquan both right there around that 15%. Either one of them could be more like 18 or 19%. Drake's too busy grinding tape. That's
goddamn right. Send this guy a shirt.
Joe King says, to be fair, the Godfather series does require vacation days.
Yeah, I don't have that much time. I can't watch like a 3-hour movie. Like my favorite movie is Shawshank. You know why? Because it's on TNT every 20 minutes. So no matter when you turn your TV on, you can pick up at a different point. And you never miss anything. Do we want to do the Drake? Do we want to do the Giants tonight, or we want to save them? I know we're an hour and 10 in. It's we'll leave it to the people. What do the people want? Well, shit, I already wrote up a blurb about him. So
well, then we better do it. I don't want to waste your blurb.
So yeah, it's not very long because this past game was awful. 31st in NFL in passing touchdowns, bottom 7 in completions, bottom 5 in passing yards, 31st in the league in explosive pass plays, which means plays over 15 yards. This was garbage. Didn't help. Thank you. See, grinding that tape, Dwayne, like our listeners.
That was me just doing Jason Garrett.
Oh, okay. See, I thought you were giving me a nice.
I was also applauding you.
Saquon went down. Obviously, we all know that. So that crushed the balance of this Giants offense. He'll be back this year. You know, there's a lot of talk where everyone's like, yeah, we don't know what Saquon's going to do. He's not fully kind of embracing it. Usually you hear these athletes and they're like, I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm ready to go. I'm going to play all 18 games. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's just weird. He's not coming out and saying things as enthusiastically as you'd like him to. Hence our pick of Devontae Booker last night.
He's got to get paid, man.
Yeah. He's going to take it. That's another thing. Contract year. The Giants want to keep him around because he's the face of the team. Daniel Jones isn't. If Daniel Jones stinks, they're going to exile him somewhere down the New Jersey Parkway and get somebody else in there next year. They got 2 first-round picks, remember, the Giants. So, all right, Saquon's back. Let's get your projections for him. And I think Kenny Golladay is so affordable as a great X-receiver that I think he's going to help people win a lot of money, and I think he's very undervalued this year.
Yeah. So, first of all, Jason Garrett is still running a 2008 NFL offense, which you remember what it used to be is Peyton Manning and Phillip Rivers and Tony Romo. Everybody could line up and no huddle, but it really wasn't about hurrying up. It was about doing 20 checks and all this crap, and then finally you snap the ball with 0 seconds left on the play clock. So he ran no huddle 27.5% of the time. That's second most in the entire NFL. That's plus 18% versus the NFL average. You think, oh, wow, look at Jason Garrett really pushing the tempo. Nope, 60.4 plays per game. That's 30th in the league. Come on, Jason. Play action 26.7% of the time. That's 14th in the league. That's plus 1%. Come on, Jason. You know to use play action more than that. Shift motion 44.6% of the time. That's 23rd in the league, minus 5% versus the league average. Trick look, 7.2%, 19th in the league, minus 2% versus the league average. He's not doing anything really to help out his quarterback. He's not doing anything to help out, his offense in a pre-snap standpoint. From a pre-snap standpoint, even his no huddle is just basically turning into probably the defense just picking up on Daniel Jones' calls and audibles and knowing what play is coming. And those were some things that we heard at the end of his tenure here, with the Cowboys. And who knows, some of that's just players, being, upset and not wanting the blame to fall on them and trying to keep their job when the new boss comes in. They're also a really injured team. Barkley, like you mentioned, missed 14 games. Nate Solder was out for COVID. He missed 16 games. They did have some injuries. Offensive line, their 2020 first-round pick, Andrew Thomas, didn't go so well. Pick 1.4, graded 59 out of 79 tackles in the league. That was problematic. Their left guard graded 80th out of 80 with Pro Football Focus. So that's a positive. Nick Gates, their center, graded 27 out of 36 centers. Their right guard, Will Hernandez, was so bad they brought in some spare named Zach Fulton to replace him, who graded out as 42nd out of 80. They will get Nate Solder back this year, or maybe they use Matt Pert, their third-round pick from 2020. So the offensive line has got some major problems. They've added multiple playmakers, like you said. You bring in Kenny Golladay, you add Kadarius Toney in the first round. Now he's already having issues with minicamp and OTAs. You know, he didn't come into OTAs because of, you know, didn't want to get injured, but he already had an injury insurance contract like most rookies do, so they can go through OTAs and not have to worry about getting hurt.
He was a terrible pick. Can we just say that?
And then his cleats were bothering him. It felt like an Antonio Brown situation, right?
He stinks. That's a terrible pick. The Giants with all those offensive line issues, and I get that they, you got a guy coming back, and they were looking to take Devonta Smith. You don't need another wide receiver, New York Giants. You need help on the line. Like, what are we doing here? And you're going and you're picking up. You don't get Devonta Smith, so you trade down, and then you get gadgety Kadarius Toney. They're not even the same type of receiver. So the one guy you were looking for wasn't there. So he plays the same position. We'll get this guy. Terrible pick. Sorry.
I actually like Kadarius Toney as the player. I worry about him more just because he can't seem to get his stuff straight. His ish. He has a lot of off-season challenges. It's probably going to be problematic. I think from a skill set standpoint, like, he could be a great, slot receiver. He's a playmaker. He could do a lot of really good things. But I do get your point. But you can also be gun shy when you spend pick number 4 the season before, and so far that pick is bombed at left tackle. Mm-hmm. So the Giants, they've got their issues, with their personnel. But the main thing is they did add these weapons. They did also add Kyle Rudolph. They added John Ross as well, another former first-round bust. So we know they're focused on the offense. It's basically now or never, right, for Daniel Jones. I mean, he's going to be surrounded with weapons. I still expect it to be a multiple-look offense. You're going to see, like I said, just signing Rudolph, you're going to see plenty of 12 personnel. You're going to see some 11 personnel. You'll see some 21 personnel. Garrett's always been a coach to kind of mix all those things up. So right now, where do I have Daniel Jones with all of his new weapons? So right now, Drake, I've got him at 542 attempts. I've got him with 353 yard completions. That's at a 65% completion rate, 4,065 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, 12 picks. Then I got him right at 402 yards rushing and 2 rushing touchdowns. So again, he's right there in that range with Tua, with Baker, with Derek Carr. I mean, there's a lot of guys right there, in that range. And so he's in the same range. The positive that you could say for him is that he does have more weapons than he's ever had, right? So it's like, I mean, Evan Ingram still has had the best, rookie season ever, right, by a tight end. He's a talented mismatch player. We know Kenny Golladay can stretch outside. Darius Slayton, even though he was a late-round pick, has had some good chemistry with Daniel Jones. He can stretch the field outside. Sterling Shepard has typically been Daniel Jones's favorite target when he's healthy and he's on the field. He can still work the slot. And now if Toney can give them anything, and then you have a guy in Barkley who can also catch the ball out of the backfield. So, like, if Daniel Jones doesn't, succeed this year, I mean, I don't see how they keep moving forward, with him. Maybe they do, but I feel like he's got it. This is his year. He's got to at least have the season that I just gave him. Like, he can't just tank. He at least needs to just be like average to below average, which is where I've got him graded, is right at below average when you look at him from an NFL perspective. From a fantasy asset perspective, he's even a little bit below average right now. But I could understand the upside, and you can stack him in best ball because there are plenty of weapons that you can look at. Like you mentioned with Barkley, they're taking precautions. He knows he's got a huge payday on the line. Booker was signed on the first day of free agency to a two-year, $5.5 million deal. That tells you a little bit. Gettleman referred to him as an every down back. So my guess is they're going to kind of try to take it a little bit easier on Barkley. I don't think it's going to be probably as pronounced as what some people are making it. You could also say, well, Barkley's just been hurt pretty much every year. Maybe they just felt they had to sign Booker because they thought Barkley was going to get hurt, not because they want to take it easy on him. That could also be the case, So I could see it either way. But where I've got Barkley right now is just getting a slightly lesser load. Not terrible. I still have him at 62.5% of the carries. That's 277 attempts. 4.5 yards per carry, still healthy, one of the better marks that I give in the league, 1,250 yards rushing, 10 rushing touchdowns, 12% of the targets, that's 65 targets, 50 receptions, 415 yards receiving, 2.5 receiving touchdowns. That's 290 points, right at 300. Would have been 273 last year. So Barkley's still a first-round pick easily, and I could still see people making the argument that why let him go by pick 6. I get it. He's still an elite, young player. But I think right now, this is why you're seeing him slide down to like pick 7, 8, 9. And I think it's okay to take him there. I don't necessarily think that you have to take him by pick 6. But I'm willing to take him, anywhere from pick 6 on, Drake. I can be in on Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, we were thinking about him last night if he fell to us at the 1-8.
But Derrick Henry was there, so otherwise we probably took Barkley. I really wanted to go Tyreek Hill, but I could have easily been talked in, into Barkley. So Kenny Golladay, I've got real quick on Devontae Booker. I still don't have him at a lot. I've got him at 100 attempts. I've got him at 400 yards rushing, 3 rushing touchdowns. I've got him right at 100 yards receiving and half of a receiving touchdown. So it's still really more of a handcuff type play. He could give you a couple of heavier workloads up front in the season. Maybe they kind of split it even between, the 2 backs the first couple of weeks. But who really wants to play the New York Giants backfield when it's split between 2 players? Like, you need it to be all one player because the offense has struggled. Kenny Golladay, I do like. I've got him at 22% of the targets. That's 120 targets. His catch rate's going to be lower because I do expect him to work down the field. His catch rate has never really been high. And a lot of it is because of the average depth of target where he gets targeted. But I've got him at 70 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So that's 215 points in a PPR, 181.5, 146 in a non-PPR. You know what I mean? But he's gonna lead the team in targets. You sign a 4-year, $72 million deal, but he's always been more of a 20 to 22% target share guy. And I think there are still enough weapons on this offense that I think they spread it around, Drake. I think he's the leader, but I don't think I've seen some people talking about, is this Kenny Galladay's year to be 26, 27% target share? It could happen. They don't have to, right? They still have these other capable parts that they can get the ball to, which we already talked about. I think Slayton, continues to stretch the field. So I've got him at 600 yards, 4 touchdowns on 37 receptions. I've got him coming down though, because I think we've got to see what's going to happen. Slayton and Sterling Shepard, they're the 2 guys that who's going to play outside when they're in 12 personnel. I don't know. Slayton used to always get to play in those situations because he was the field stretcher. Well, now they could have Golladay do that. And would they rather have Sterling Shepard on the field playing the Z, working underneath? Because really, Evan Ingram isn't an underneath route runner. He's more of a work the seam guy. So I could see, from a scheme standpoint, it easily being in the 12 personnel sets. It could be Golladay with Sterling Shepard still getting on the field instead of Slayton now. And then you've got, Evan Ingram and Kyle Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph definitely is going to work the shorter area of the field, but Ingram working more the deep middle, Golladay stretching things out, and then Sterling Shepard running more of those short, intermediate, dig type routes, things like that. But Shepard is the guy that historically Daniel Jones, since he's been there, has loved. And people have pretty much forgotten him. You can get him for nothing. And it is a crowded wide receiver core. If he ends up out of the 12 personnel sets, he's not the guy out there. It's going to really hurt him. But he's averaged 26% of targets last year once he was healthy from week 7 through the finish. And despite the 12 groupings, he averaged 87% of the routes. So last year, he was the guy getting to be out there along with Slayton. So again, now we have Golladay, so you got to keep an eye on that. And Kadarius Toney is still a wild card, right? If they try to get him on the field or they form any sort of rotation. And Kadarius Toney, showing up is probably one of the bigger reasons that Sterling Shepard is falling, not necessarily Golladay. But I think Shepard in best ball especially, he and Crowder both, even though they've got crowded areas, they're still going to show up, Drake, with those 8 or 9 catch games because they're just getting peppered with targets. And I still see that happening. So right now, I'm not saying Shepard's this great asset. I've got him at 61 catches for 600 yards, 4 receiving touchdowns. I've got Kadarius Toney at 22 receptions, 285 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. Obviously not very much. Evan Ingram, if you look at Ingram, I'm not as concerned as others because Evan Ingram has really been dealing with 12 personnel groupings for multiple years now, and it's not really slowed him down. And I don't think Kyle Rudolph is really that great of a player. So we talked about this earlier with Irv Smith. I think it hurts Evan Ingram a little bit, but I don't think it hurts him as much. I think his draft price is getting depressed a little bit too much. I still see him. I don't think he can be 20% to 22% of the offense. I thought that was his upside last year with all these weapons they've added. I think you're looking more 14 to 17%. I've got him at 16% of the targets, 87 targets, 56 receptions, 600 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I mean, that's 166 points in a premium league. That is 138 in a normal PPR and 109.5 and 81 in a non-PPR for Shirley.
And Kyle Rudolph really is going to be Daniel Jones's best friend because he is a de facto third tackle on the field. And he's going to help those guys, hopefully give Daniel Jones a little more time. That's
how Rudolph was used a lot last year, even in Minnesota.
Yeah.
He was not always running routes. He was staying in to block a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, that's exactly what they're going to do with him. So, well, folks, I hope you enjoyed it. We got through the 5 teams. We'll do 5 more next week. Dwayne will be on the beach sipping Mai Tais and crushing cans of Modelo on his head as we prepare for draft season. But, hey, we're grinding through. We're here, and we're glad you guys are all with us. We really are. If you're following us on Twitter, I'm at Drake Fantasy. Dwayne, of course, is at Dwayne McFarland. The show is at FF Hustle. And we've got some exclusive content over at the YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com, of course. Search Fantasy Football Hustle. You can check out the Pros versus Joes draft we did last night. Pretty kick-ass. Sees an interesting draft, to say the least, and with our quarterbacks that we ended up with. We won't let the cat out of the bag there, but interesting is the word we'll use, Dwayne.
Hey, we talked about the strategy through the whole thing. Like, that's what we wanted to give you guys. Not every draft falls exactly the way you want it to fall. And the running backs got kind of weird the way it worked. And we could have forced a pick, but I talked through my rationale behind all of it and the way we think about the draft. So hopefully you guys enjoy it.
There you go. All right. So for Dwayne, I am Drake. Take it easy, folks. We'll catch you next week. And remember to never get out hustled. We'll see you, folks. Take care.